Hello, everybody. Welcome to Phillies Extra, the baseball show from the Philadelphia Inquirer. I'm Scott Lauber, and I write about the Phillies and Major League Baseball. Whether you're watching on the Inquirer live page at inquirer.com, YouTube, Facebook, or X, or listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, I want to thank you for sharing a sliver of your time with us. I promise it'll be worth your while. Because at long last, it is finally trade deadline week. If we had sound effects, I'd ask for a drum roll. And my guest this week is the oldest player in the Phillies organization. David Robertson is back for a third stint with the Phillies. The veteran reliever, who turned 40 in April, signed a $16 million contract that will be prorated to about $6 million for the rest of the season. He agreed to a 15-day optional assignment at AAA Lehigh Valley, where the plan is for him to get into at least 4 games, most likely back-to-back appearances as well, before joining the Phillies bullpen once he's eligible on or around August 5th. Now, Robertson doesn't have an agent. He represents himself, and he's been around the block long enough to know how market forces work. So when he didn't get the offers that he was looking for in free agency after having a solid season last year with the Rangers, he decided to stay home with his family, keep his arm in shape, let the season unfold, and then re-engage with teams a few months in. And in plotting out the timing of it all, he circled July 31st, the trade deadline, on his calendar and began working backwards from there, because teams tend to get more and more desperate as the deadline gets closer and closer. And as Robertson said the other day, quote, "Instead of having to trade for me, you can just pick me up and not lose any prospects. I thought it gave me a little bit more leverage." Well, Robertson was right. He threw 30 pitches off a mound on July 19th at Bryant College in Smithfield, Rhode Island, not far from his home. And he got scouts from 9 teams to come watch. Craig Breslow, the Red Sox chief baseball officer, was there in person. The Mets and Yankees attended. So did the Dodgers, Cubs, Tigers, and several of those teams were interested. As Robertson put it, quote, "I fielded enough offers that I had to make a decision quickly." The Phillies had to move quickly, too. They were in touch with Robertson earlier in the season after Jose Alvarado got suspended, but Robertson wasn't ready to come back just yet. A few weeks ago, they sent pro scout Todd Donovan to watch him throw. Longtime special assistant Charlie Kerfeld went to the big showcase in Rhode Island. And although Donovan and Kerfeld agreed that Robertson was probably at the equivalent stage of like the middle of spring training in terms of his arm strength, they also recommended that the Phillies move to sign him because, as everyone knows, they need more than just one reliever to strengthen their bullpen. And from John Middleton and Dave Dombrowski to just about everyone else in baseball operations and scouting, the Phillies are more comfortable spending money than trading away prospects. Pretty much any team would say the same. To me, though, the Robertson move was also a hedge against the reliever trade market being less than bountiful than everyone expected. Depending on when you're listening to this, the deadline is anywhere from 6 days to 1 or 2 days away. And yet, the sense I get from talking to people around the league is that it's still maybe 50-50 that the Twins will trade closer Joan Duran or even setup man Griffin Jax. The same goes for the Guardians and their closer Emmanuel Clase. Everyone seems pretty sure the Orioles will unload a bunch of players before 6 p.m. on July 31st, but nobody would be surprised if their sale is limited to walkier players such as Ryan O'Hearn, Cedric Mullins, old friend Zach Eflin, and Sir Anthony Dominguez, rather than closer Felix Bautista, who's under control through 2027. And if Duran, Clase, Bautista, and certainly Mason Miller of the A's do happen to actually be available, it would be only for a package that includes like multiple top 100 prospects. In the Phillies case, that includes some combination of Andrew Painter, Aiden Miller, Justin Crawford, Eduardo Tait, Arun Escobar, and Mick Abel. So yeah, signing Robertson now assures the Phillies of adding at least one bullpen arm. And if the A-list relievers are unavailable or the asks are too much, maybe they pivot to a second-tier option like the Pirates' David Bednar and Dennis Santana, or even rental closer Ryan Helsley from the Cardinals, who came out of the All-Star break by getting swept by the Diamondbacks and losing 2 of 3 to the Rockies. Anyway, is there a better time than right now to sit down with Robertson and get his thoughts on the market and how he might be able to help the Phillies chase down the World Series title that has eluded this core? And when we're finished, you'll want to stick with me because I'll bring in my Inquirer teammate Lachlan March for a trade deadline preview. And as always, I'll take a question at the end. So let's get right to it. Here's my conversation with David Robertson. David Robertson, welcome to Phillies Extra from the Philadelphia Inquirer. Thanks so much for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
I know this has been a super busy week for you, from the showcase in Rhode Island to negotiating the contract, to coming to Philly, and then reporting to Allentown. Take me through kind of the last few weeks and the process of informing teams that, hey, I'm ready to talk about a contract, and then actually getting to the point where you were fielding offers that kind of met what you were looking for.
Yeah, it actually came together a lot faster than I was expecting. I stayed in touch with a lot of teams throughout the season. Everybody would kind of circle back within a month or 3 weeks or so and just kind of check and see where I was at. And there was a point where I was really ready to go in spring and just kind of didn't quite get to where I wanted to be with some teams to sign in the fall. And then I kind of just shut down for a little while and just focused on family life for a little bit and said, well, if it didn't happen in the fall, I'm going to go and just enjoy my life and then pick a time and look to get ready to go so that I could get my body and everything ready to go right around, just after the All-Star break. And it all came together and has worked out so far. I mean, obviously I'm not in between the big league lines yet, but I'm hoping to be able to come up there and help out.
Was there a point this spring when you thought maybe you wouldn't come back? Because you weren't in uniform on opening day for the first time in 18, 19 years, probably longer than that. And you and your wife have 3 kids, and you said the other day you were doing the drop-offs and the pickups and the dad stuff. And I wonder, if there was a point where you were like, maybe I'm done with baseball. Maybe this is going to be, maybe I'm just in dad mode now.
I get the thoughts all the time. I don't feel like I'm ready to hang it up yet. I feel like I've got something left in the tank, and that run we had in 22 here, I think if maybe we'd have won it in 22, I might have hung it up. But there's just that chance to go get a ring again, and I want that opportunity. I want to get into that postseason again with a team that's looking to go all the way, and it just that was the blessing of being able to throw this late in the year and kind of choose where I wanted to go, and my opportunities became apparent really quickly.
So we're less than a week now from the trade deadline, and even now the word you hear most often from team officials is fluid. The market is fluid. As we sit here, there are I think all but 8 teams that are no more than 5 games out of a playoff spot.
Yeah, a lot of bubble teams.
Yeah. So for some, it won't be until the last 48 hours, maybe 72, before they decide buy, sell, do nothing. You must have an interesting perspective on that, because you were talking to some teams here as you're looking to come back. And I wonder, whether, I think you mentioned the other day that the timing of all of this, wanting to do this right around this time of year, given the leverage that you might have because you were a free agent rather than someone who'd have to get traded for. Mm-hmm. What was your sense, if you have one, for kind of what the reliever market might look like here in the next few days?
Well, every team's always looking to add depth at any spot on the field. Bullpen pieces, there's just not that many of them that are readily available to teams. And I know that organizations don't want to give up their prospects, especially their top prospects, to go get an arm that they may only get for a couple of months and not have control over it going into the offseason. So it does give me a lot of leverage, being that I'm just a free agent. You don't have to give up anything to get me except, figuring out a contract and putting me in between the lines, maybe making a roster spot if you have to. That gave me a lot of leverage in that. And I also was really hoping to avoid signing too early with the team and the potential of, got a bit of fallout on the team of losing, 12 out of 15 games and then getting traded again. Midseason trades are just tough. I've had it happen 3 times to me, and 22 was a great year. I knew I was getting traded at the start of that year pretty much, but it's still tough on me and on the family.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I wanted to ask you, we all talk about the trade deadline for months and months before it happens. We never talk about what it's like to actually get traded. And you said it's happened to you 3 times: White Sox to Yankees in 17, Cubs to Phillies in 22, and then, a couple of years ago, Mets to Marlins in 23. Mm-hmm. I'm curious, did you see those trades coming in those instances? You mentioned in 22, you probably did. Yeah. Were you ever caught off guard? And can you describe what it's like to have to baseball is such a routine sport. You do the same thing, same times every day, to have to pick up your life, move your family. I would imagine it kind of throws your life into a bit of upheaval there for a few days.
It does. Baseball is a long season. You get settled into a routine and you get that normalcy of going to the clubhouse and being with the same guys, and your family knows the route to the field and where to go and where the family room is and how to get to and from. And you start to make a life there, even though it's a shorter version of it. It's a 6 months there. When you have to uproot after 3.5 months of being there and just pack everything almost overnight and get on a plane and go join another team and immediately have to step in there and do, be as good as you were with the other team. That's all they're expecting you to do. But it's just a lot. It can stress your family out. It can stress me out. And you just have to keep going with it. You have to forget about everything you had a day ago and turn around and focus on what you're going to do now. And it's tough.
How about 23? Did that one, you signed with the Mets. They thought they were going to be good and have a really good year. It doesn't go that way. I mean, did you see these deals coming really in all three cases, or were you kind of like blindsided by any of them?
The Mets, not so. I kind of knew with Billy Epler to talk with me, and the season just wasn't going the way they wanted, and they were looking to get some prospects, and my value was very high. I did not want to be traded, but I did get traded. I don't blame them as part of the business. In 17, when I got traded from the White Sox, I still had another year left on my contract. I really wasn't paying any attention to it, so I was kind of caught with that one. I wasn't expecting it, and I just had a baby a few weeks before, so it was like, one of those times. But the only blessing about that was I went back to New York, where I happened to know everybody and kind of walked into it a little bit more seamlessly than other places that I've been traded to. So that was good. But even last year, I mean, when the trade deadline came, my house was boxed up and ready to go, and it was like, I'm going to be ready for it this time. If I've got to go, like, we'll figure out a moving truck. And my wife's like, well, great, I guess we'll figure out the van shipment, and we'll make it work. It'll just be another stressor on us.
Right. So, you talked to a lot of teams in the last week and a half or so. How many? And you talked about how, look, they can just sign you. They don't have to trade their prospects. Did you get a sense, because these are all contenders, or a lot of them are, at least, that, it was a hedge too. Like, in the event that Clase doesn't get traded or Durant doesn't get traded, like, hey, look, we don't want to be left empty-handed at the deadline if the supply is not what we think it's going to be. I mean, did you get that feeling did teams sort of get that into it with you in terms of like, hey, look, we want you because we want to make sure we have a reliever help?
I never had that conversation with teams. I just kind of assumed that that's the way it was going to play out, and it seemed to be that everybody has kind of thought the same way I did. Like I said, you never know if you're going to be able to acquire someone, and you never know like what you're going to want to give up. And for me, it was a little bit easier being a free agent just in the middle of the season. I feel like I was in good shape. I was ready to go. I had to make myself available for everybody to see that I was capable of doing what I'd done in the years past. Now, I haven't done it yet between the lines, but I'm working my way towards it. We're kind of doing a little bit of a mock spring training down here with the Iron Pigs.
So you've now had as many stints with the Phillies as there are Godfather movies, right? You're halfway to the Rocky series. But it's interesting because, you came here as a first time, for the first time as a free agent in that big 2018, 2019 offseason when they trade for JT, they trade for Segura, they signed McCutchen, they signed Bryce.
Yeah.
It was sort of that leap, right, from rebuilding to wanting to contend again. Even if they weren't exactly ready, they were making that jump.
Mm-hmm.
You came back in 22, and now like we're part of that run where they get over the hump, they end the long playoff drought, go to the World Series. Nobody outside of maybe the clubhouse saw that was going to happen. And now you come back and you're rejoining this team that's been together for 3-4 years, the core of it at least, and maybe they hear the clock ticking a little bit in terms of like, it's not often that a core stays together for this long. There are probably going to be some changes made after this year with some players who are free agents at the end of the year. They probably won't be fully intact ever again. I wonder kind of what this Phillies run has looked like to you as someone who has seen it from the inside and from across the field over a span now of 6 years, them going from where they were when you got here to where they are now that you're back.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely been a great group. They've done a really good job of putting this group together. I mean, there's so much talent in that clubhouse. Being inside of it was a lot of fun. Being on the other side of it, out there having to pitch against them, was not fun. I've had my days where they've roughed me up, and I love all those guys, and I'm glad to be on their side now. but yeah, I mean, I know what you're saying about the group being together for a while. They've been together, and then battling through the playoffs. They just we haven't been able to make it happen. We're almost close in 22, 23 is close, 24. It's tough to win. I've been on groups like that with the Yankees in a long time ago, and we just couldn't quite put it together again after 2009. I don't think that anyone feels the clock ticking. I think every year you feel the clock ticking, no matter which team you're on going through the season. Like, your games are counting down, and that group that you're playing with may never be a group again. But everyone wants to win, and everyone wants that group that you're with to win with that group. So I know things will change over the years, but it is a good group. I don't know how they managed to get everybody together like this, but it's a hell of a squad.
You're going to throw a pitch at age 40. I wonder whether you think about things when you see Rich Hill do it at 45, and I mean, how far do you want to go? I mean, how far into the 40s do you want to get?
Let's just see if I can come back and do, put together a good season like I did last year, for 2 months, and then if that works out and I feel good about it going into next year, heck, I might try this again.
Pretty soon you're Jamie Moyer,
Yeah, I mean, I'm hoping. Listen, the game will let me know if I'm not welcome anymore. I know that for sure. But I still feel like I've got it. So I've got to go out here and test it and see if I can get it done.
All right. Let me get you out of here on this. You've pitched in 18 postseason series. You've made 42 appearances in the postseason. That's fourth among active pitchers, behind Kenley Jansen, Ryan Presley, and Aroldis Chapman. You've had a lot of success in the postseason. I wonder what's the key, number one, what's the key to being effective in the postseason? Because we've seen that setting do some funny things to some really good pitchers. And then two, what goes through your mind when I say 2 on, 2 out, Aledmys Diaz at the plate in the 10th inning of Game 1 of the World Series in 2022 in Houston?
Oh, well, let me answer your last question first, because I can remember it. I remember just being like, I have got nothing left right now, but I've got to get this out. We have to win Game 1. I was like, I have never beat Houston in the playoffs, and by God, I want to beat them so bad.
Right.
That was the relief after it. I mean, I feel like JT could see it too. He's like, Dave's throwing crap in here, but we're gonna get it out. All we gotta do is get one more out, and we'll win this game. We'll be ahead 1-0. Yeah. And then the postseason, I mean, as a whole, it is like a rookie debut pitching time. Your heart's racing, everything's on the line. You've got to make pitch after pitch, and mistakes happen so fast, and the crowd's so loud. The environment's intense. It is what you play baseball for. That's why I want to be back in between the lines. That's why I can't sit around at the house right now.
Yeah.
Getting the chills talking about it. I'm ready. I want to get back into it.
You're right. If anyone wanted to win in Houston, I mean, obviously everyone wanted to win that it's the World Series, but I mean, you have a lot of reasons to want to win there. And, you won it in 2009, you get back in 22, a long time in between, but that's your postseason. That's your one and only right now so far postseason save. I wonder what that moment was like for you in terms of, like, if you have to rank things. Like, I'm sure winning the World Series in 2009 is probably the number one, right? But, like, closing out that game in those circumstances.
It was a big deal. Believe me. I mean, we fought tooth and nail to get there at that point, and a lot of things had happened and gone our way. And I mean, it was a big one for me. I mean, I thought when we won Game 1, I was like, we're going to win this thing. We're going to do it. And it just didn't materialize for us. But that's up there on my list for sure. I wish I would have been such a nervous wreck. I wish I'd had some better stuff to throw in there. Maybe it would have gone a little smoother.
Well, you got the save, so I mean, you can talk about it any way you want. You can say, hey, it was 1, 2, 3. David, look, this was a lot of fun, man. Like I said, I know how hectic this past week has been, and I know you're there in Lehigh to get your work in and make sure you're ready to get up here when the 15-day assignment's over. You're always so generous with your time. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you setting aside a few minutes for us at Phillies Extra from the Philadelphia Inquirer. Thanks again, and I'm looking forward to seeing you back in the Phillies clubhouse here in the next week or two.
No problem. Thanks for having me on, Scott.
Thank you. I can't thank David Robertson enough for joining us this week. It's time now for our Reporter's Notebook segment, and I want to welcome in Lachlan March, my baseball writing teammate at the Inquirer. Lachlan, thank you for doing this.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, let's get right to it. I think we've been talking about the trade deadline for like 2 months now, maybe even longer, and here it is. It's almost upon us. The Phillies usually bring all of their people to Citizens Bank Park and kind of bunker down in in a war room of sorts in the days leading up to the deadline. I'll be at Yankee Stadium first, then you'll be in Chicago, and then we'll both be checking with people around the sport to kind of figure out what's going on before 6 p.m. Thursday. Are you ready? Like, is your phone charged? It's going to get a little crazy.
Yeah, I got to keep my charger on me. Yeah, it's my first trade deadline officially on the beat, so I'm excited. Let's do this.
Yeah. Phone charger is critical this time of year, I would say. Conveniently, the Phillies aren't playing on deadline day, so we won't be distracted. The deadline will have our full attention, as it probably would have anyway. And I think we're in agreement based on like what we know that the Phillies' primary focus is going to be adding another big bullpen arm. So without knowing where every team stands in terms of buying and selling, because quite frankly, several teams are still on the fence and don't know where they stand, what do you think the chances are that they get help for the bullpen beyond signing David Robertson the other day?
I mean, I don't know whether to put a percentage on it or anything like that. Like you said, we don't really know exactly where other teams stand, who's available. But I do think that high leverage arms are going to be kind of hard to come by and expensive when they do. So it's really just a question of what the Phillies are willing to pay and whether they're willing to outbid the other buyers who will also probably be looking for bullpen help to end up with a high leverage arm.
Yeah, I mean, that's my big question because, it's definitely going to be a seller's market in terms of like the sellers are going to outweigh the buyers. They just are. You look at how many teams are within 5 games of a playoff spot. I think it's all but 8 teams right now in the entire league, and both leagues are within 5 games of a playoff spot. I think a lot of teams are going to look at this in as we sit here today in 5 days, and they're going to say, we still think we can get in. And if we think we can get in, we're not going to sell. We might not buy, but we might just stand pat and just play it out and see how it goes. If you could tell me right now that the Guardians are going to make Emmanuel Clase available, or that the Twins are going to be committed to trading Joan Duran, same with the A's and Mason Miller, or the Orioles and Felix Bautista, then, like if I'm the Phillies, I think I swallow hard and I put together a package that starts with Aiden Miller, and maybe it includes Mick Abel or another decent prospect or two, and I just do it because of all these, all of these closers that I just mentioned are controllable beyond this season. They would solve a problem that's really hurt the Phillies the last 2 postseasons. It's really kind of sunk them the last 2 postseasons. Dombrowski often talks about quote unquote difference makers when he talks to like his inner circle and to John Middleton. And I know that a lot of evaluators like in this time period don't like to look at a closer and apply that term difference maker to a closer. But I think for the Phillies, given their needs and those pitchers' abilities, I really think those guys could be difference makers for them. But the closer the deadline gets, the more I wonder, like, is Clase, Duran, Bautista, and certainly Mason Miller, are they even going to really be available? Because, and if they're not, the inventory really thins out after that. So, like, do the Phillies just move a notch down and go for David Bednar or Dennis Santana in Pittsburgh, or, a rental closer like Ryan Helsley? I really think that the closer market, which once looked like it might have a lot of options, is going to be fluid and maybe not as plentiful as we thought. Do you pay like a steeper than you want to price for like a plan B closer?
Yeah, I mean, you might have to do that, but I think you can also put together a package that is so rich that a team can't refuse. Like that's all you can do if teams like are not interested or excited to sell those guys, those top leverage guys. And this is a situation that the Phillies find themselves in because they didn't do enough in the offseason. So if they do have to part with their top guys, that's just the price that they have to pay for not adding enough in the winter when they had the chance.
It's a really good point. Dombrowski said the other day he doesn't have any regrets. Of course, that's what he's going to say. But you do have to think would they be in this situation if they had come up with more than one arm in the offseason, more than just Jordan Romano? Like we've talked about how 1 + 1 = 2 and not 1. And they lost Hoffman and Estevez, replaced them with Romano. Romano has not had a good year. And here you are in this pickle. And I do wonder, the Twins are going to, they're going to hold out Joan Duran and Griffin Jackson. They're going to say, if you want them, you got to make us want to give them up. We don't want to give them up. And I wonder whether you kind of have to shake one of those guys loose if you're the Phillies. And by that, I mean really overpay in terms of what you're giving up to get them. Let's move to the outfield, because I thought Dombrowski said something very interesting the other day about Justin Crawford. He acknowledged that, there have been times where the Phillies have considered calling him up. He also noted that, if they call up Crawford needs to play every day. And that can't happen here right now unless A, someone gets moved off the roster, or B, the Phillies don't trade for another outfielder, and that's still a possibility that they could make a move. Once those two things are resolved, once they say, all right, we're passing on Cedric Mullins, we're passing on Luis Robert Jr., and, maybe we're clearing out a spot somehow, whether it's involving Max Kepler, whether it's some other way, once those two things are resolved, it sounds like Crawford might be here. And timing-wise, it reminds me of 2016 when Dombrowski ran the Red Sox and he called up Andrew Benintendi right after the deadline to be the everyday left fielder. I wonder whether that's the move here with Crawford, or, maybe they end up doing something where they find that they find a way to improve their outfield externally, and they leave Crawford in AAA for a while.
It's just an interesting to me because in my perspective, you're taking quite a risk if you do that and call him up to place these expectations of being the everyday left fielder on him without him ever having really proved himself at the major league level. And there's still question marks over whether his swing will translate. And I don't know if you're putting him in the best position to adapt to that if you bring him up, because he doesn't really have an opportunity to fail. Because if he's the everyday guy, he's the everyday guy, and then the trade deadline is passed. So there's no really other options. So, I mean, it's certainly possible based on Dombrowski's comments that that's what they do. But I'd just be kind of interested to see how that plays out, because I think it's a bit of a risk to have a prospect like that, keep him in AAA all season, and then bring him up when you really have no other options. And your hands are tied at that point, because if it doesn't work out, what else are you going to do?
Yeah. What do you think of so Cedric Mullins, Taylor Ward, who had a really nice weekend when the Angels were in here a couple of series ago, right-handed hitter with some power, might be available, might not, because the Angels are kind of sort of fringy, hanging in there. I think they think that they're hanging in there, whether they really are or not. It really doesn't matter. It's how they look at it. He's controllable beyond this year. He could still help them. A guy I've thought a lot about is Luis Robert Jr. What if it costs you virtually nothing to get him? What if you can trade a backup catcher in Single A to get Luis Robert Jr. for 2 months, because you're not going to pick up the option next year? Do you take a flyer on a player like that and put him out in center field and say, hell, maybe getting him out of Chicago kind of revitalizes him a little bit?
I think why not? I mean, I think they've known to do stuff like that in the past. They did that with Austin Hayes, and obviously that did not work out. But I do think that they need to try. I think they need to try to do something to shake up this outfield, to get another bat in there. I think, yes, bullpen help is at the top of the list, but I think an impact bat might be just as important. The Phillies hit a lot of home runs on Wednesday, and that was a good sign. But there's been so many games where the offense has just let down a dominant starting pitching performance, and you don't want the postseason to roll around and this have a repeat of last year and be wondering what if they did acquire another bat at the deadline.
Yeah, and I think that's my takeaway from the Red Sox series we just saw. Zach Wheeler was not dominant Zach Wheeler, but he still pitched really well for 6 innings. Christopher Sanchez the next night was absolutely lights out, dominant. That's your game 1 and 2 starter right there. And what happens if they both go out there and they pitch great and you just don't score for them, and then you're going home, or you waste those terrific starts? You don't know, pitcher health is always a question year to year, and you're healthy right now. You've got these horses. And then, oh, by the way, you've got Ranger Suarez behind them, and eventually Aaron Nola behind them, and, maybe Jesus Luzardo behind them. You've got to win with this rotation right now. Let's wrap this segment up with this. What's your ideal deadline for the Phillies? What realistic and also ideal? What can they do? And I'll start. And you'll bring us home after that. I think you keep the Twins on the phone until you're able to pry away one of their relievers. I think you just wear them down, and you wear them down by also giving them what you said, like an offer that they can't ignore. Preferably Duran. Like, if they want a package that begins with Aiden Miller, I think you do it, because Duran throws 100 miles an hour. He closed out two games in the Twins wild card sweep of the Blue Jays back in 23. He's under control through 2027, which lines up with your Zach Wheeler window. And look, if they want another top 6 prospect from you, like when I say top 6, I think, Andrew Painter, Aiden Miller, Justin Crawford, Arun Escobar, Eduardo Tait, and Mick Abel are kind of like the 6. And you can separate them into 3 and 3, or however you want it, the top 3, next 3. But I think those are really the 6. And if they want 2 of those 6, like maybe Mick Abel, well, then I'm trying to get like Willie Castro, a switch hitter who hits lefties really well and can go out and play the outfield. I think if you could do something like that, I think that's your ideal deadline for the Phillies, because you get yourself a real impact arm at the back of the rotation and a piece who might be able to help you in the outfield, even if it's in a platoon situation.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you along those same lines. Like, I think obviously number 1 on the list, bullpen arm. Try as much as you can, whatever it costs, to get a high leverage guy. Like Felix Bautista would be the dream for me, just because of his body of work overall. Although I don't know if the Orioles will listen for him. I don't know. It would take a lot. I know that, because I think the Orioles are hoping that they'll be back in the mix in 2026. And he has some control. But that would be number 1. And then, like you said, someone like Robert Jr., taking a flyer on someone like that, just to have some sort of addition in terms of a bat. But you really pool all your resources kind of to get the bullpen help that you desperately need at this point. That would be what I would do if I was Dave Dombrowski.
I like it. Well, there you go. You see, we solved the trade deadline. Just like that. Let's get Dombrowski on the phone and let's get it done.
Yeah. You're welcome, Dave. So
you can thank us later. Lachlan, you want to stick around for our final segment, our hit and run segment, where we take a question?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, it's time for Hit and Run. We take a question from a listener or a viewer out there. A reminder, you can submit a question by email at slauber@inquirer.com, or on the social media platform of your choice, X, Blue Sky, Facebook, Instagram, Threads, LinkedIn, you name it, I'm there. So you can find me there and hit me up with a question or a comment. This week's question comes from loyal reader and listener Andrew Sherman at Shermaning on X, who writes, "It just seems like Brent Rooker is the ideal righty bat for the Phillies. Would they consider trading for him, even if it meant that he and Kyle Schwarber would split time in left field and DH?" Andrew, thanks for the question. I like how you're thinking, but there aren't any indications that the A's are going to make Rooker available. For one thing, they signed him to a 5-year, $60 million extension that runs through 2029. It's a great contract, perfect for a team like the A's, and between Rooker and Lawrence Butler, who also signed a long-term deal, and their terrific rookie shortstop, Jacob Wilson, and probably Mason Miller, I think that they have a nice little core that's going to be together when they finally make the move to Las Vegas. But, and Lachlan and I, we were talking about this off camera. We have wondered if the Phillies would consider just sort of like selling out for offense, right, by acquiring the best hitter available. Let's say a Eugenio Suarez from the Diamondbacks, if they decide to trade him, and moving Schwarber back to left field. You'd have to know that the added offense would outweigh the diminished defense, but considering the Phillies' strength is their starting pitching, they'd also have to think long and hard about weakening their defense. But what do you think, Lachlan, about like an outside the box idea like that, especially if those A-list closers we were talking about don't end up being available?
Yeah, I think it goes back to what you said about the starting pitching and not wanting to waste this time. I think if the closers aren't available, if you can't get your dream a high leverage arm, you have to do something. And that might be the solution. That might be the difference maker but you have to try. I think there has to be an addition that's made no matter what. And Yeah, I like Eugenio Suarez. Obviously, he's been having been kind of on a tear lately, and it sounds like he will be moved. So why not throw your hat in the ring and kind of just figure out how to like fit him into the lineup after that, And I mean, I think the team itself. I know that there is a lot of talk in the offseason about how Bryce Harper was willing to move back to left field to add someone like Pete Alonso. And obviously that didn't happen. And I don't know if Dave is exactly anxious to do that. I think Bryce is a very good first baseman, one of the best in the league. So you don't want to downgrade on the defensive side of that. But I think that kind of idea, I think the team itself, if Bryce Harper, the leader, is willing to do that, I think that there are other people who might be willing on the team to move their role a little bit or shift around if that means winning a World Series.
Yeah, I mean, Kyle Schwarber like I do. Like, I don't think Kyle Schwarber is going to say no to that. In fact, I think there would be benefit to Kyle Schwarber going out and playing left field a little bit because, then he can go out on the free agent market and say, you see, I'm not just a DH. I can still play the outfield. Not that would be his motivation for doing it per se, because he's a pretty good team guy, but he's also in better shape, I think, today than he was in 2022 when he was out there. I was also reminded the other day that the Phillies won their 2 World Series with Greg Luzinski and Pat Burrell playing left field, neither of whom were like Gold Glovers out there. Certainly Pat was not. They won their last 2 pennants with Raul Ibanez and Kyle Schwarber as their primary left fielders. Left field in Citizens Bank Park is not the most challenging left field in the league. I don't think you'd want to do it, let's say, at Yankee Stadium where it's pretty expansive, but just something to think about, because if we're talking about difference makers like Dombrowski does, there's I think one difference making hitter available, and that's Eugenio Suarez. He doesn't fit them positionally, but I do wonder whether they could think to do something that we haven't really thought much about or considered much, because there's not a real opening there in terms of like the lineup. So we'll see. It would be interesting because it would protect Bryce Harper for sure in the middle of that lineup if they were able to do something like that.
Yeah, it would definitely be interesting to see how that shakes out. And I mean, last year they added a high leverage arm and they added outfield help, and it didn't work out. So maybe Dave Dombrowski tries something completely off the wall this year to see if that is what tips him over the edge. So I guess anything's possible.
That is a good way to put it when it comes to the 5 days before the trade deadline or whatever we are now. Anything is possible. And just when you think you kind of know and got it figured out, there's going to be a twist or a turn or a trade that somebody makes that we didn't see coming for all of this buildup that we have before the deadline. We'll leave it there, and we'll tell you that every episode, all 24 of them now of Phillies Extra, are available at inquirer.com/inquirer-live-sports or on the Inquirer's YouTube page or Facebook. You can also listen to this episode and others, beginning with our Bryce Harper conversation from a few weeks ago on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. While you're there, please give us a follow, rate, review us. It really does help. Thanks again to my guest, Phillies reliever David Robertson, and of course, to my fellow Inquirer baseball writer Lachlan March. And thanks, as always, to our producer, Angelica Irizarry, who hits it out of the park for us every week by making sure this whole operation runs smoothly. Enjoy the trade deadline, everyone. And thanks so much for listening, watching, and, of course, for reading the Philadelphia Inquirer.